Welcome to the Freight Project podcast, brought to you by Ceresys, a North American third-party logistics company providing shippers transportation management, technology, and solutions.
On today's The Freight Project podcast episode, I welcome Blythe Brumleve, founder of trucking-focused digital marketing agency Digital Dispatch, to talk about how companies who are looking to reach truckers can improve trucking marketing using new digital marketing tools, and how trucking influencers may help in achieving marketing goals. I hope you enjoy this episode of the Freight Project podcast. Well, hello, Blythe, and welcome to the Freight Project podcast. As with any first-time guest, welcome. Good to have you. Two high-energy folks on the call today. I'm going to tell you, folks listening on the Freight Project podcast, is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be high energy, and you got two classic marketers here to teach you about how you can improve your own freight marketing, because we've actually done it a few times. So, Blythe, if you could, with that, folks know who I am. They hear my voice every week. I'm not sure they're yet tired of it, thankfully, and I hope they never do. Please listen to us. But anyway, let's get to know who you are, Blythe. What's your background, and what company do you come from?
Sure. So I started in the world of trucking and logistics, working for a 3PL about 10 years ago. I was their executive assistant. And at the same time, I was also working as a sports and entertainment blogger here in Jacksonville, Florida. And when my boss at the time found out that I was, preparing my own websites and blogging and creating content, he said, well, why don't you start doing that for us? So that's when I got my feet wet with my first, website that I created, social media for the B2B space. And that eventually evolved into more opportunities. Unfortunately, that company ended up closing down about 5 years later. And then I was sort of in a flux career-wise, not sure what I was going to do. So I saw an advertisement for a local magazine. They were looking for an editor, and I applied, and I got it. And it was probably the best couple years of my working career, because it was the first time I was able to work with a collaborative marketing team. And that experience also led into other opportunities here on the local level with sports talk radio, and also some TV broadcasting opportunities. And then after that, I joined with another logistics company, did some marketing for them for about 2 years exclusively. And then it was about 3 years ago that I decided to open up my own agency with one of those brands under the umbrella company called Digital Dispatch, which launched about a year ago. And that focuses solely on marketing, growth marketing tactics, and website development, custom applications, things like that for the transportation and logistics space. So here we are today.
Well, that's interesting. We both got our start in the world of media in Florida. So my first job in the digital foray was actually selling ads on pnj.com at the Pensacola News Journal in Pensacola, Florida, about a decade ago. Nice. And I had to, teach local businesses what the heck .com meant and what SEO was. And so I had to quickly educate myself on that to try and sell it. And then when we moved back to Texas, where me and my wife were originally from, I wanted to stay in that industry, and Dallas-Fort Worth was a good market, kind of burgeoning in the social media space. And then I got into, the job at Ceresys and fell in love with the logistics industry. So it sounds like with, your touch at the 3PL and your love of digital marketing, that you too also fell in love with the supply chain space. Why does it intrigue you?
I think it's one of those industries that's commonly thought of to outsiders as sort of a boring industry, right? And this is, and the more I find out about it, the more I do, warehouse tours and port tours and things like that. You really just get a grasp of how much problem solving is involved in this industry. I mean, every day it's essentially putting out fires, and that's whether you're driving a truck across the country, or if you're, on a large container ship, or if you're just in the office working in the accounting department or working in the marketing department. There really are so many interconnected aspects of this industry, and rightfully so. And you realize how many touch points this industry has. I mean, they really have all touch points as far as the consumer is concerned, and being able to shine a light on how much work goes into these processes is really what sort of drives me every day.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, it's problem solving at its best. And I think that's why it really is a great opportunity for digital and content marketing. Now, you and I are really marketers, and we came from the media business first. And, I know when I came in, I first saw that the industry was like, the reason I was so attracted to working at Ceresys, they'd never marketed the company before, is that obviously I first looked at the SEO aspect of it and looked around and I said, there is nobody doing this like at a concerted level, and I wasn't sure why. I think it's changed a little bit. It's improved in the last 7 years, but I'd have to say there's a lot of room to go, especially with some of these smaller companies. And some reasons for this need for growth is that the industry itself is still not as disrupted from a technology standpoint as other industries, say marketing or finance or those kinds of industries. And it often still relies on a sales process that's a little more referral based, long-term relationships to kind of come, a logistics manager might go to another shipper and kind of bring on the people they had before that, and I've seen some resistance in the space to developing these digital marketing strategies. And so how do you go about when you're, trying to get a client and you're talking to somebody in the space to help them with marketing? How do you effectively explain to them the real results? Because I think they have trouble seeing the end results if they're not aware of how this stuff works. So how do you get them to, get over that, blind spot that they have and, getting them to where they can see those results and realize and trust in you as they hire you to help them with marketing?
I think you sort of hit the nail on the head just then when you said the word trust. Is that's what I like to focus solely on my services. I know that there are a lot of other companies out there that will try to sell you something that you don't need, but for me personally, it's one of those situations where I would rather be honest and upfront with you at first, so then there's realistic expectations that are put into place, because I don't want to promise you that, hey, if you start publishing, a blog post a week, in a month, you're going to start seeing 100 leads come through the door. That's just not how internet marketing works. That's not how digital media works. You have to then establish that trust with your audience. And I think that if you're upfront and honest with your potential clients, then there's less confusion later on. So for me, the scope process of mapping out a client's journey as far as their website is concerned, as far as their content is concerned, really is customer centric, both on how I deal with the customer and then also how they would deal with their potential customers that they're trying to recruit. So whatever their end goal ROI is, I reverse engineer that goal to a plan that both fits their vision and budget. Because budget is also a big concern. I think that there's a little bit of an unrealistic expectation that if you have a fancy website with all the bells and whistles, that people are just going to come crawling to you in order to want to do business with you. And it just doesn't work that way. You have to provide, those realistic expectations, but also the education of what your website and growth marketing can do. You can have instant results if you pay for it. If you're paying for advertising, you're going to get those more instant results. But if you're interested in more of the long-term game or a combination of the two, a short game and a long game, then that can be a situation where you can get a little bit of immediate results, but also have an investment in your long-term plan.
Yeah, I kind of always equated it to sort of how, you graduate from college, you get a job, which is your salary. It kind of pays the day-to-day bills. You try your best to do some savings, but if you're smart, you kind of look for a company or work with a company that maybe does a 401k match. And if they don't, at least you're giving to something towards your retirement that will have, take a while to really increase and see an ROI on. But once you do, and you're doing those daily deposits, a little bit like, producing content that's search engine optimized, that eventually what you should see is it starts to take hold and your money is making money on its own, and you're less dependent upon that day-to-day job or what might be called in marketing, advertising, which can cost a lot and be more expensive once you start ranking in search engines. It's a lot cheaper at that point, and you become less dependent on continually just spitting money out, or at least you get to stay at that same level. And you now are augmenting leads from advertising and awareness from advertising as well as from search. And so it sounds like you're really, steering your clients in the right direction with their goals and letting them know that, hey, I'm not here to just, give you another great shiny object. I'm here to give you what your goals are. And that kind of brings me to another topic. Not much different than what supply chain professionals are facing in their disruption of their industry. Marketing kind of faces disruptions left and right, and there are shiny objects. And one of those I think I've seen, but I think can be used well if done right. And I think you're a unique marketer in this space that's really a trailblazer with it, and that's influencers. And that's a term that I think in the media, from a commercial aspect, let's say the Instagram influencers out there who, like you said on your recent podcast, literally promoted a brand in the middle of a motorcycle accident where it puts, kind of seems like a negative thing. So how can you go to a supply chain or trucking CEO and say, here's a good tactic within your overall strategy to leverage an influencer? How do you, get them over this bad rap that influencers have?
Well, I think it's kind of crazy that the phrase influencer just almost incites a lot of anger already among a lot of people, especially marketers. So it's one of those situations where the phrase, it probably you need to overcome that hurdle with your potential clients in order for whoever they're trying to work for, whoever they're trying to target. But I have seen some larger success with what's called a micro influencer. And even though influencers in theory have always been around, there's always been key influential people in different industries across the board. I think it's only recently that trucking has started to see the growth of an influencer base. And one of those spaces is the truck market. Drivers have some of the largest reach among many social media professionals, because if you think about it, a driver is on the road all the time. They feel less connected to their office. And so what they do is they create these social media platforms and connect with each other and talk about the industry with each other. And some of these drivers have thousands and thousands of followers, not just on Instagram, but on Facebook and on YouTube as well. YouTube is probably where they're most active, but they use that as a place to connect with each other. And I think that that's where a lot of transportation companies and especially trucking companies are missing out on the boat with working with influencers like that, is that you can target both of the influencers that have the large market base, like some of these truck drivers, and the word of mouth spreads among them, because we know how drivers like to talk. And if they have one connection, if they're getting a really good rate with one company, then they're going to talk and they're going to tell their other friends about it. And so that's really the network of influencer / word of mouth marketing. But then you also have the other side of it where you have what's called the micro influencer. And the micro influencer a lot of times has greater engagement with a target audience. And I think that that's where more companies would see more value in focusing their efforts there. And a micro influencer will have anywhere from 5 to 20,000 followers, depending on the platform. And if it still sounds like a lot, and especially in an industry that's just sort of slower to adopt tools like Instagram. But if you're targeting people that fit that niche, but also have their toes a little bit dipped into the waters of the supply chain industry, then that's an opportunity that you can capitalize as far as being, a big fish in a little pond and going after it, while everybody else is it's sort of like what Gary Vee says, while everybody else is talking about the legitimacy of a platform, I'm just going to dive in and start experimenting with the content. And then you can be that big fish in a little pond, experimenting with tactics that other companies are still in the meeting rooms debating on whether or not to try.
Yeah, I think that's probably why we've seen a lot of success at Ceresis. I've never been a marketer. I'm not a classic marketer. I didn't go to school for it. I'm a sales guy first. And so I've always been focused on not the shiny object, but the end result, right? And that you can't be afraid to not sound perfect. I think sometimes some of the more classic marketers, and this is not all of them, but some and some non-classic marketers, they get really caught up on the appearance of things. And to me, that's not necessarily a model built on sustainability or results. It's more I care more about what I look like and what I'm perceived as. And yes, that's important. But I think it's more important to really resonate with a specific target audience, especially in our space, in the B2B marketing world, where you can talk to the actual problems that audience is trying to solve. And if you can, engage them deeper with your brand and with your solutions, or just around a discussion of those problems. That's why we have podcasts like this, a little richer media. I think influencers is another extension of that to kind of bring some personalized, human marketing to the picture, right? Where people can connect with a brand. And at the end of the day, in a B2B setting, at least, people still buy from people.
Exactly.
And people hate to be sold, but they love to buy. And so if you can connect with them, that's where it's at. Okay, so let's connect these things together, right? This sometimes seems ethereal. It's like, okay, I'm a trucking executive. You're telling me to go and find a YouTuber trucker who can help me in recruiting more drivers because that's one of my business problems. But I also have other marketing goals like getting more loads. How do I integrate and put together some of these channels? And influencer might be considered a channel, and SEO might be considered a channel, advertising with the publications a channel. How do you put all of that together in order to truly, match the holistic goals of your clients?
Well, if you're wanting to match the holistic goals of your clients, you have to start out with the problems that your clients are facing. And that's starting at the ground level, talking to influencers, figuring out what frequently asked questions they're getting, what they're seeing at the ground level, what your sales team is seeing at the ground level, and then figure out a way of how those problems fit into your ideal customer. So then you're going to start with making buyer personas, which I think is, every marketer's favorite and most hated word of all time, which is buyer personas. Because once you have a buyer persona of who you're trying to target, then it makes it a little bit easier to craft content around that potential buyer's problems. And the way easiest and the hardest way that I do this is with funnels. Being able to map out a funnel, especially using software, it has helped me tremendously just sort of visualize and note take or every step of the process. So I spoke earlier about how I want to know the end goal for my client, but I also want to know how we can reverse engineer and create messaging around that eventual end goal for them. And so marketing funnels have really been my bread and butter for the past couple years now. And being able to map out that process has helped tremendously, because then it's as easy as, if this campaign is working, then let's try to replicate it and do it with another campaign, another traffic source, whether it's through email or whether it's through social, whether it's through organic SEO content, which is by far my favorite and where I see the highest returns. That's where I want to have a methodology to the madness, because if I can't prove ROI, then I'm not doing my job, and I'm not helping my clients know where their pain points are and how we can get better and how we can improve. Because the more my client grows, the more I grow.
That's right. And their success is your success. And at the end of the day, they need those kinds of truths, and they need the ability to see a roadmap. They need the ability to attribute their dollars that they've invested to an appreciable ROI. And that's really tough to do. And I think it takes using the right tools, in marketing. I think in 2010, I think back to that, we started seeing a proliferation and explosion of marketing technology. In fact, I think some of it was really confusing. I know for me, I just sort of stopped paying attention to the noise and, made sure that I continued to have a focus on the results and not get distracted too much. I needed to try things out, but I needed to do it in a smart, controlled manner. And I think a lot of marketers, and it's a lot better now in 2019, especially with APIs and integration and different things like that, and proven systems as the content marketing and digital marketing world's matured. But supply chain professionals and people in freight and shippers are having to deal with that reality now. We're seeing an explosion of freight technology, an adoption of technology. And so, when it comes to, that reality, as they're trying to grow their business and they have maybe some confusion on how to make marketing work, or maybe it's bigger than that, and they aren't effectively managing their supply chain. Is this proliferation of technology just a danger of creating that same confusion that a lot of marketing folks had with trucking executives? Or how can somebody like yourself, a marketing professional, help decrease this confusion, and maybe through marketing help them see a path to other aspects of their business digitizing?
I think we're already in danger of seeing that it's almost like a software hangover, for where you go and the software sounds great and you purchase it and it probably costs you a pretty penny to do so, but then you don't think about the long-term aspects of actually implementation and adoption. Adoption is probably the biggest hurdle for a lot of clients to overcome as far as like their marketing and their website is concerned. It's either they want to do it themselves or they want you to do it all for them. So either which situation, us marketers, we have to put education at the forefront of whatever our clients are deciding to do. There have been plenty of instances that I've dealt with a client in particular that they know that they wanted to have some blog content, and then it was up to me to create it. And then they said, no, I want to start writing it myself. And then they start writing it and they never hit publish, because I think there's also that fear of putting something out there, of putting, a new video out there, of new safety training, or maybe even live streaming a meeting. A lot of companies fear taking that next step as far as putting their company out there. And so I think that with us marketers, we need to help these companies along the way, not just with education, but realistic expectations of how much time commitment a new software program is going to take, how much time possible an API integration could take. There needs to be that realistic expectation set forth ahead of time, instead of just, trying to sell someone, like you said, a shiny new tool. The education needs to be at the forefront. And I know that's something I need to get better at. It's something that I'm currently working on, educating my clients on the different software tools that they have at their disposal. But ultimately, the win-win is if the client adopts the software in the end. It's not just one thing to buy it. That's not going to be your cure-all, but you need to actually adopt the software and help your clients along the way with how they can use that software that ultimately benefits their ROI.
Absolutely. So let's continue to talk about that ROI. When I started out here at Cearsys, one of our first orders of business for the marketing department was to really lay a solid foundation of consistency and execution first. We didn't want to get too ahead of our skis. I didn't want to start with a podcast just kind of coming out with things, because they had never really done any real messaging before. We had to lay the cement. We had to get the wiring done. All of that, I had to understand first what freight even meant, as I was new to the industry, of course. And, I had to extract out of the people who work there what their story was. I say, honestly, I'm just trying to tell their story. But, that's my version. You've kind of dealt with a lot more different industries, and now specifically with the transportation industry. Is there really some advice, that you can give other marketers or executives at trucking and supply chain companies when it comes to properly achieving sustainable success with marketing that isn't, a wave of just good leads every now and again, and then there's none for months, or it's a blog on Tuesday, and then it's not another blog for 2 years?
Right. It's definitely for a lot of marketing teams, and I feel your struggle because I was there too. But you have to, you got to play two strategies. You got to play the long term, which is the SEO organic content, and evergreen content, meaning content that can live on your site for a few years without it needing to be updated. That content, how to become a freight agent for us, for example, is an example of evergreen content. And then you also have to do the short term goals as well, and that you can achieve those short-term goals through digital ads and social media. But whatever campaign ideas you have, these have to be able to show an ROI for the KPIs that the executive team agrees on. And the sooner you establish these KPIs with the executive team, I think the more time you will save in the long run, because then everybody knows what the end goal is for certain content that's being created, and you're proving the reasoning behind your work and the overall value of it. Because as marketers, we have to be able to prove the ROI of our work, or I know there's a lot of talk of recession that's coming, but as a marketer, if you are able to prove the ROI of your work, then you're more likely to keep your job, because 9 times out of 10, the marketing budget is going to be the first thing that gets slashed, because a lot of the times, especially in this industry, it's difficult, I think, for a lot of marketers who are probably wearing several hats at the company. It's difficult for them to sort of, devote the full-time status that it needs in order to see a positive ROI. And then I think it's also important, I said this earlier, to make it a point to talk with the ground floor sales team, because they're the ones talking to all of the leads, all of the customers on a regular basis. And so they know those pain points. And if you as a marketer can create content around those pain points, then you'll be able to send them better leads, more qualified leads that they'll be able to close at a higher rate.
Yeah, and just to give them, relevant talking points as well. Hopefully that they can copy and paste into an email as they go through the sales process. And I think, you've stitched it all together. You said start with the goals and the problems in mind, orchestrate a strategy that's attributable, that follows the real funnel path, that when you do something that's, innovative, like using an influencer, work really hard to tie it back to the overall marketing channels and the strategy, and be real and be relevant and make it an integral part to your company, not just something that's for pretty pictures and makes you look cool, but actually really helps solve the problems of the audience you're trying to reach. And when you can be seen as the mechanic who educates you on why your engine failed, and you're not just a auto shop that says, well, your engine's failed, we got to fix it. Mm-hmm. And when you ask, they go, it's too complicated. You don't build trust with the slick company who may have had slick marketing, but then when you have an experience with the mechanic, it's kind of iffy. I'd rather take it to the guy who may not have a slick marketing storefront per se, but he treats me like a human being and respects my problems and solves them and educates me along the way, to know that we can build a relationship that's built on trust. And that's what I'm taking away. Well, excellent, Blythe. Well, thanks for, imparting your wisdom upon our listeners of the Freight Project podcast. I think they're smarter for hearing you. I don't think any of what you said isn't also applicable to a supply chain person's operations and how they're going about their job. And I think what we're going to see is more collaboration between those two departments. And so having your insights on today to maybe a CEO or an owner of a company out there that needs some help from marketing, where can they find more about you and reach out, Blythe?
Sure, absolutely. You can find me at digitaldispatch.io, and it lists out all of the ways that we can help you reach your target audience and help you speed along some different services, API integrations, process paperwork, applications, recruiting, things like that. So digitaldispatch.io is where I primarily live every day of my life as of late.
Awesome. And we'll make sure on the podcast publish page to have that link there as well. Blythe, thank you so much for your time today on the Freight Project podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And for all of our listeners out there who tune in each week, we appreciate you listening to the words we have to say. I hope they're helpful. Keep coming back. Thank you for coming back. Have a great week.